Are you a Muslim who's married or looking to get married? I'm sure you've heard that more than 50% of Muslim marriages are ending in a divorce. Now that's unfortunate, but there's help out there. My name is Hina Mirza. I'm a registered psychotherapist with a specialization in Islamic counseling. And I've been working with hundreds of couples building healthy, happy, strong marriages. Sign up for the course that I just completed with Happy Strong Family to foolproof your marriage and make sure that you have all the right tools and all the right skills to lead a healthy, happy, strong life with your partner.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back to our Happy Strong Family podcast. Today, we are here with Brother Omar Khan. Omar Khan is the co-founder and CEO of Ruh, a mindfulness app and therapy platform that integrates psychology with Islam, aiming to revolutionize Islamic psychology by harnessing the power of technology. Previously, as an advisory product manager at IBM, Omar led their flagship business analytics product. He holds an MBA from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor's of Engineering in Computer Science from Carleton University. He was part of the Canadian Delegation to the G20 Young Entrepreneurs Alliance and has served as a lead volunteer with several nonprofit and charitable organizations. We'll hand it over to Brother Omar Khan.
Assalamu alaikum. Barakatuh.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah. Pleasure to be here, and subhanAllah, jazakallah khair for having us.
Like
you said, Ruh really started from my own personal struggles. Even though I'm not a mental health professional, in the pandemic, I was going through my own mental health challenges, trying to find a solution to cope with, and couldn't really find anything that was like Muslim and accessible by technology. And so, really started from that need to find a solution, and we realized a lot of people in the community felt the same way, that existing solutions aren't working for them.
Yeah.
What was surprising is almost half the people I would speak with would say they associate being mindful with their faith, and they didn't really find something that connected the two. And so they actually excluded themselves from accessing care. So Ruh initially started as an Islamic mindfulness app. We would be promoting it at masajids and different events. And every single time someone would come and ask us this one question: do you connect us with the Muslim therapist inside the app? And so we put a directory of therapists together. Today, it's the largest global directory of Muslim therapists. We have about 700 therapists in 18 countries.
Wow.
And really helped, I guess, the discoverability aspect of finding a Muslim therapist.
Yeah.
Like, we would still get questions around accessibility of care. Like, how do I book an appointment? Like, how do I know who's the right therapist for me? And so then we launched an online therapy platform last year. Now we are providing therapy that is culturally and faith responsive, in line with our Islamic values, that is delivered by exceptional clinicians in 11 different languages. So English, Urdu, Arabic, Punjabi, Creole, French, Somali. And alhamdulillah, for children as young as 3 years and above, to individuals, couples, families, all across Canada, UK, Australia, and a few different countries as well. So it's been a beautiful journey so far.
Alhamdulillah. And we were talking off screen that it's so cool how you don't have the background in psychology, but you technically could because you've had so much experience now. But the main reason you got into this was your own struggle. And I'm curious to know, like, how was it maybe the technicalities of technology? How was it having a technology background? How were you able to make Ruh better and even more accessible? How did that work?
And subhanAllah, we see in our history as well, right? In Islam, like, our scholars were like having multidisciplinary approaches. Like, there would be physicians and there would be an Islamic scholar in particular areas. Like, they would have that. And I think one thing in the Muslim mental health space in Islamic psychology, we have seen like there's so much traction and momentum we have gained in the academia and research side of things. But the solutions have been lagging behind. We haven't seen as much translate into actual solutions that people can use. And so that was my goal with Ruh, as well as like, really, alhamdulillah, we have the technical skills in our community.
Yes.
But we haven't put that into action in the mental health space as much. So really, how can we bridge that gap and make that accessible? So now with Ruh, alhamdulillah, the goal is to kind of really build that Muslim mental health infrastructure. And alhamdulillah, we have that now with Ruh.
Yeah.
And that can now be deployed into so many different areas, like with masjid counseling programs, with crisis response solutions, which we did in Palestine. Like, there's so many areas that we could use now technology to make that accessible, which was not accessible before, or mobilize people in a different level that we couldn't do before.
Yeah.
So alhamdulillah, I think overall, because of that reason, like, because we integrated technology, accessing care is now more easier than it was ever before, especially for our Muslim community.
Yeah. And something that I feel like when it comes to technology and psychology, where the disconnect is for me is like, when it comes to just even accessing care or being mindful, I can't use my phone. That means putting my phone away. That means putting technology away. So I think even for someone who's maybe more traditional, I have a lot of siblings who are older, millennials who take on the traditional no phones for the kids until they're older, that stance, that I'm like, no, like there's no way that we could bring technology into this sphere. So I'm just curious how you would help frame the minds if people say, well, no, technology is not related to psychology. Psychology is about going into the mountains and meditating there. How could I use a phone for that?
It's a very good question. And subhanAllah, like, we oftentimes like look at technology as like the problem.
Yes.
But technology is really a tool at the end of the day, right? It's really how we kind of leverage that to take positive action or negative action for ourselves. With Ruh, for example, like we have a mindfulness app that people can use to contemplate and reflect and really ground themselves. There's breathing exercises there that also really connect you back to Allah as well. At the end of the day, that's the goal of Islamic mindfulness, is so that we become better believers. And we can use technology to help access that. And so nowadays, there's so many distractions available on our phones.
Exactly.
We need to kind of build on the positive side of what our phones could be used for, right? Because when we don't have that gap, that void is filled by those distractions. So Netflix, YouTube, there's so many areas that are really excelling in that areas. We need to have our own solutions that are excelling in the areas that we want people to actually use, right?
Well said. Yeah.
And so the other aspect of technology is like it makes things accessible from a distance perspective as well. Like,
right.
Especially now with online therapy, what we're finding is like a lot of parents who would primarily like maybe have to get childcare to go and travel and commute and get therapy don't have to do that anymore. Exactly. They can access it from the comfort of their own space. A lot of people who didn't have access to a car to commute, that's no longer an issue. They can actually still access care because of technology. So alhamdulillah, it's opened up so many like opportunities for people to actually access care that were not as much accessible before.
Exactly. And even from a therapy perspective, as someone who's done virtual therapy and in person, and this was just recently where I was like, oh my God, I met my therapist in person and online. And I'm very open about that. Like I think it's important to just be open that, we also seek therapy because 100%. Especially as someone with a psychology background or interested in furthering psychology, you realize that therapists need their therapists,
True.
And so just seeing that, it's like, I feel like there is a difference, of course, being in person with someone, but from the actual gain perspective and what I need from therapy is, for example, growth and working on myself. There's no, I personally believe there's no disconnect there. How do you feel about that disconnect that maybe people might say, oh, but in person versus virtual, is there a difference?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a difference in like the preferences as well for people, right? Like some people do prefer in person. And that is totally fair and valid. But from a research perspective, a lot of research actually indicates that the efficacy of therapy online and in person is fairly similar. Sometimes actually,
I'm glad there's research backing what I just said.
There is. And there's also research, some of them, which actually says online is even more effective because of the other barriers it unlocks, right, for you.
Exactly. For people who need that accessibility.
For people who need that accessibility, exactly. That they value that accessibility.
Exactly.
The other piece we find is like, therapy is really about the therapeutic alliance. One of the most effective indicators of effective therapy is the therapeutic alliance that you have, the relationship you have built with your therapist. And that doesn't always is not determined by in-person relationship, right? It could be built up online as well. There's so many other factors that go into it than just the space that you occupy together. It could be a virtual space. So there's so many things that can happen online, especially the therapeutic alliance can happen online as well. And research also shows efficacy is almost similar. So alhamdulillah, it's been working out really well, especially for our clients as well that we see today.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I didn't even think about that as the ability for people to be like just working with one therapist and like building that relationship online. It's just it's almost the exact same and even better as being in person. That's very cool.
The other actually thing that it unlocked is the opportunity to access care that might be specialized. So for example, like in Ottawa, maybe the therapist in Ottawa are not specializing in the area that I need help in.
Yeah.
But now I can access a therapist in Toronto who is a specialist in that area.
Yeah.
And that just unlocks so much more for me than just being in the same space with someone. So
exactly. Yeah. So the distance, you cover the distance of even like specific needs.
100%.
And I feel like that is something that's so important because even though there are many Muslim therapists, it's still a growing community.
It is.
And even with Islamic psychology, I feel like just from a research perspective, I know there's a Khalil Center, for example, and we have different books, but I do think that that's something that's lacking still. Like there is like if you just think of North America, there's so many ways that in the Eastern part of the world, there's certain mindfulness techniques. I was just speaking to someone about this, that there's like art therapy, for example, that we don't utilize here, but someone in the Eastern world does. So it's really cool to unlock different ways of even having therapy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's so much to do. I think we're just literally scratching the surface. I feel like we're really in this rooted kind of revival stage of Muslim mental health, Islamic psychology.
Yeah.
And there's so much to do.
Yeah.
Especially like you said, especially on the eastern side of the world, there's so many traditions that are still there that are looking different in here in the western side. So there's a lot of cross-pollination still happening.
Yeah.
There's still growth happening there.
Exactly. Yeah. With having like so many therapists in your platform, how do you like just, I guess my question is, how do you manage and look at, well, how are things working? How are they going well? How do you manage just like the efficiency of Ruh?
It's a great question, Subhan. That's in a manner, right? For us, at the end of the day, like if our therapists are seeing clients, it's impacting their life. So our goal, like as a team, would be to always make sure they're getting the best quality care. So with the Ruh, alhamdulillah, we have our clinical director, Amani, who is, mashallah, very well trained, has 15 years of experience working in Dawah, and gives weekly alaqas in our masjid, but also is an exceptional clinician. So she led mental health teams before. So she's now like leading and building our therapist team and making sure there's supervision for them. Like we have bi-weekly consultations. So our therapists get together, kind of speak with each other about tougher cases that come in and get each other's advice. There's really like when someone works with our team, it's as if like they're having the expertise in the minds of everyone coming together, helping
That's amazing.
Nice. They have on-demand supervision as well. We have quarterly trainings. We have, we're launching this month, scholarly consultations as well. So we have a scholar on board that they can consult with for any Islamic-related questions. So we really try to make sure like our quality of service is high. We provide that coaching to our therapists. And even one step before that, like any therapist that we do accept on the team, there's a very robust interview process to make sure that very value aligned with our values, with Islamic values, so that we can actually go out to the community and promise that our therapists will be practicing in line with our Islamic values. They're grounded both clinically and spiritually as well. To make that promise, it takes a lot behind the scenes. Alhamdulillah, we do that work together as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's amazing. Because one thing about therapy, I feel like that personal aspect of like, this is like just someone's personal journey, and there's so many different types of problems that can come up, and then having a team behind them, knowing that Ruh Care is not just like one person behind you, but a whole team to help assist that. That's awesome. Yeah. That's really good. One thing we were discussing as well is like the barriers that there are to accessing therapy. What would you say is one of the biggest barriers in terms of someone accessing therapy?
So there's many barriers. I think we could go on this discussion for quite some time. One of the big ones is faith-based barriers, right? Like I think as Muslims, like really Islam is our way of life, right? It's really integrated into who we are. And oftentimes, like, especially in the conventional spaces, like you're kind of expected to kind of check Allah at the door, and you come in like, as just getting therapy by itself. But we can't really fully dissociate ourselves with our identity of being Muslim. So that's why sometimes the conventional solutions don't work out for people, is because they're just treated directly without having that spiritual, holistic an approach integrated. But then it comes to now, let's say you're seeing a Muslim therapist, but even like you said, there's so many Muslim therapists that are still growing in different areas.
Exactly.
Our Muslim community is very diverse too. So being a Muslim therapist doesn't necessarily mean you're fully value aligned together still. Right. Exactly. It is still on the client to kind of make sure that they do the due diligence to make sure they're value aligned. Especially like, for example, like if certain values are important to you, you can ask your therapist. Like, one of the things I tell everyone all the time is like really take advantage. So before the session happens, you could read their bio, you could read their about descriptions on their website to really learn about their approach, how they kind of like approach the therapy. But a lot of therapists actually have a 15-minute introduction call, consultation call that they offer. This is really a good time for people to go in and ask their questions that are important. Like say, how do you integrate spirituality into your practice? What is your stance on, let's say, gender roles or, sexuality, different areas like that might be important to you. If let's say you're going for couples therapy, like have you trained from an Islamic point of view in couples therapy, rights of husbands and a wife? So you really get to see like where they are at, and you get to, have these introduction calls with a few therapists, see who you appreciate and you resonate with. You could go ahead with that. So there's different areas like that you can actually take advantage of in the space where you have that 15-minute call, right? Benefit from that, really see who is very aligned with you, take that step and go ahead, inshallah, with that.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact we're honest about, well, not everyone thinks of Islam in the same way, because that is true that people have different values even within our Islamic principles, and the basics align. And even for some people in therapy, the basics line doesn't actually mean anything. It's like it needs to go deeper.
100%.
And I totally understand that, where it's like they have like a certain set of, this is the principles that I want someone else to have when I'm seeking therapy, so they can consult me in that same way.
100%.
And I feel like everyone has like a different level of Islamic learning when it comes to even being an Islamic psychologist. So that's an interesting topic, I think, just to think of, that how can we as a community, what do we call Islamic psychology? Like, that's just, I'm curious, this is something that's coming up for me right now, is how do we even call something Islamic psychology?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think there's one definition. Even Islamic psychology as a field is quite, still in the evolution stages, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Rania, for example, from Stanford is doing great work in this. Dr. Abdullah Rathman in the UK, Dr. Human and Khalil Center.
Yes.
There's so many different frameworks of Islamic psychology, especially in the eastern side of the world as well as in Malaysia. There's so many frameworks coming up.
Exactly.
I don't
Which
think
are
there's one
so
definition.
different.
So they're very different. And even actually in the Middle East, there's the definitions for Islamic psychology that are very different than the Western definitions of Islamic psychology.
Could you go into that? I actually don't know about any, like, especially when you mentioned Malaysia, Middle Eastern, like.
So like from I mean, I'm not really an expert in this, but like from the brief conversations I've had, mashallah, there's like really good frameworks developed in the Western side of things, like even Dr. Abdullah, Dr. Human, Dr. Rania, and so on, that have been working on that. But on the Eastern like side of things, what I find is a lot of times like it's very much more ground up. Like, there's different levels of doing Islamic psychology. You could Islamicize things from the West. You could take the good, leave the bad, take a more integration approach. Like you take a more bottoms-up approach where you start from Islam and then you kind of build up from the psychological lens. What I found in the Eastern side is, especially in the Saudi space, scholars I was speaking with, they even say like, I would not even want myself to get trained from the Western perspective, but rather before that, I just start from the Quran and build that up from there. So they feel like, having the Western training of psychotherapy puts that lens on you, which might not be the most beneficial. So there's different perspectives. This is like a bigger.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Because they're literally saying, forget the psychological.
Fully bottoms up from scratch.
Exactly. We're starting with the Quran and Sunnah. That's crazy. Wow. Yeah. Because I could, just from learning from a Western lens, I could never think about someone saying that, because I did Islamic studies as well. So for 6 years I did with Al Huda Institute, I'd done Islamic education. But when I did my psychology education right after, I completely that was one thing, and then bringing it together is very different as well.
Absolutely.
Because, and even in psychology, like if you think about it, there's certain just certain techniques, there's certain just brain functionings, everything that you learn, which has to do with how you can help someone.
True.
So it's interesting to see that there's like, nope, no psychology degree.
It's a different perspective, which is good. It's good because it helps the field develop further, right? So,
exactly. Because if you think about it, even with like therapy with Quran, that 100% is probably, it's like that probably works. And it might just be that it's better than having your 4-year degree and then using that. So yeah, that's very cool. Wow. So yeah, there's definitely that underlying like faith-based. Islam, exactly, faith-based is very, I think now that it's coming up, it's like even this is something that I feel like with just when you're like doing therapy yourself, it's like I need to recognize that my therapist might not have exactly the same values as me, but I can say what's important for me to discuss. 100%. Like if it feels that, like XYZ Islamic concept. I'm trying to think of an example, but it's hard for me to come to mind. But even something like, I know like I personally feel like I would want a therapist to tell me, okay, like let's work on building better connections, not breaking ties, right? This is a huge, it's huge in Islam that
100%.
You, with the balance of boundaries, you connect.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that's something that like is on the client. I do agree with that, where it's on the client that this is something that I want from you. And then the therapist can tell you, well, I can't do that. Because I've had those experiences where the therapist's like, no, like I will definitely be like, put yourself first. I'm like, okay. So that's,
100%. Especially like with all the different movements happening now, right? Like there's different value systems, and now sometimes the value systems conflict with each other.
Exactly.
And then you don't want to put yourself in that position where like your therapist is recommending, because now you're trusting yourself with the therapist too. And they're suggesting an intervention which might be conflicting with your own personal belief and values.
Exactly.
So that's why when we even start the process of therapy, it's important to have the right therapist to start with.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning an example, like let's maybe switch gears slightly to the cultural side. A lot of times people really appreciate the cultural alignment as well. A lot of therapists, like, so when we match clients today as well, like in our intake process, we ask them, like, do you prefer to match with someone from the same ethnic background? Because there's a lot of deeper insights that might not be relevant to every like culture, but at the same time, not every therapist would know all those insights. So there's the aspect of being culturally responsive. For example, like when you go to a Muslim client and say, we've got to leave your house when you get to 18 years old, it's not something we do in our culture.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
If the therapist recommends that, like, prioritize yourself first, things like that, like it wouldn't be speaking to the client.
Exactly.
So you want someone like really that speaks to you as well. And a lot of times for a lot of people, it's also language that is another barrier. So like if you have someone that speaks your language, it also helps you make it really feel at home. Really be comfortable with the therapist.
Yeah. My friend and I were just talking about how sometimes she won't remember a word in English and she'll say it in Urdu.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's something, like, even something as small as that we're raised here, but sometimes we don't find words in our own language when we use a different language. That shows just how much of our culture, our language, our religion has an impact on us. Absolutely. And when it comes to therapy, accepting that, that's part of therapy too, is having someone aligned with that. I think that's beautiful. Absolutely. I'm curious though, like, if a therapist is not maybe as aligned and is like, no, like, these are the certain values I have, can they still give advice? Because part of giving counsel is also like fitting yourself into the shoes of the other person. So
True.
Is there space for that? What do you think? Because I know, like, I've went through care at one point too, and I know you actually match for the person, which is really cool. So it's like, is there space for, like, well, I'm different, but can you give me advice in my language?
Yeah. No, that's possible. I mean, we have been doing that for so many years now, right? Like, where we have had non-Muslim therapists as well. It's totally been fine. I think it depends also the needs and preferences that you have as a person, right? So, like you said, the process that we have is very personalized to the person. Like, we really take into account their needs that they're going through. This, like the preferences. Let's say someone prefers a female therapist that speaks a particular language. We take all of that into account, and then we take into account the preferences of the therapist as well, and then their specialization. So we really, from the start, our goal is to get you the right fit from the start, so you're set up for success.
Yeah.
But at the same time, let's say, there are issues. For example, someone might be going through addictions, and it might have nothing to do with spirituality. Anyone can technically help you. It's not about the value systems. It's really about getting you help in that particular challenge that you might be going through. So it is fine to get care for that reasons as well. It just helps. It's a bit more deeper, I guess, when you have that value alignment, because then you can explore so many areas. And the other piece is, like, therapy. People go to therapy for different reasons, right?
Yeah.
One could be mental health challenges, interventions there. It could be purely clinical, and that is totally fine. You can work with really anyone in that capacity.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, like, relationships, when it comes to different aspects, that's where, like, now the value system is going to start coming in. And that's where you would want to have someone that is aligned.
Yeah. And I think that's, I'm just thinking about one of the barriers is actually sometimes like a client or a person not having the tools to know that it's actually okay to have those conversations and communicate. Like, it sometimes really comes down to, like, having a difficulty in saying, this is what I'm going through, and this is the values I need aligned.
Right.
And I feel like that's just, it comes down to, like, in general, for people to know that it's okay to say, well, this is the kind of care that I need.
Right. Absolutely. It's very okay to say that. And subhanAllah, many people don't know in the Muslim community. A lot of people seek support in private as well. So right now, alhamdulillah, we have had thousands of sessions on the platform.
Yeah.
So Muslims are reaching out for care.
Yeah.
It is common in the Muslim community that people are going through the mental health challenges.
Yes, exactly.
And it is not a shameful thing to reach out for care. It's actually in your best interest. It's actually something Islam encourages as well, to take care of our intellect. One of the maqasids, one of the pillars of the Sharia as well, is to take care of our intellect. That's what we're doing when we're taking care of our mental health.
Exactly.
We are asked to tie our camel and then have tawakkul on Allah. We are tying our camel when we're going out, reaching that care, right? We're doing our part of the work that's needed to be done. What I find also is sometimes in the Muslim community is the spiritual bypassing, which essentially is a concept where, like, you're trying to put a spiritual remedy for maybe a psychological problem. So let's say people would say, you might have heard about it, people say, just make more dua, read more Quran, pray more, inshallah it will go away. You're trying to really bypass and avoid actually tackling the emotional, challenges that you're going through, the psychological wounds that you have, by applying a spiritual remedy to it. And it wouldn't help you right at the end. So alhamdulillah, I think we're getting away from there now. I think it's getting better and better, and just knowing that you're not alone in reaching out for care, there's help available. It's important for people to know.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like that's where I don't know if I could align yet with what the different frameworks that are coming from. For example, and when we mentioned the Saudi framework, I don't know if I can align with that, because I truly align with there is that aspect where you're tying your camel. That's part of therapy,
100%.
which is there's really like it's actually the psychological problems someone goes through, same as physical. If someone is going through a physical issue and they broke their arm, you are going to tell them, yes, pray and do what you need to do, and you're going to take them to the doctors, and you're going to get them the help they need. And that's the exact same with mental wounds as well. It's really, I think, dissecting and disconnecting mental and spiritual, because I don't think people do that. I think spiritual and mental feel like and sound like the same thing, but if you think about mental as intellect, it's very different. Spiritual is soul, and then there's mind, and then there's body, and it's all connected together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the things people sometimes often maybe miss is that mental health challenges could be multifaceted. They could be coming from different areas. We talked about mental and spiritual. It could be something physical that might be affecting you, that is affecting you here, right? It could be something more emotional. It could be more social, right? Like in the pandemic, a lot of us went through our mental health challenges. What really changed was the social environment changed quite a bit for us.
Yeah.
Right. When people work in a toxic work environment, right, it's not you that's inherently having issues, the social environment affecting you. So when you're saying like it's maybe a spiritual issue and you're applying a spiritual remedy, even though the actual core issue there is not necessarily spiritual in nature. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So knowing that mental health issues are multifaceted, they could be coming from a variety of areas. Addressing it from that capacity is so much more deeper than just narrowing it to one area like spirituality.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a funny question, because I know this is actually something that's been in my mind for a week, and I'm like, this is a great time to ask. But so it's interesting because Islamically there is, of course, the concept of like backbiting and gossiping, like to backbiting and gossiping. And I've done in the past, like I've done therapy for specific reasons, which is how like I didn't actually ever have to get into like building a connection and then speaking about, well, this is happening in my life. But now that I do that, I'm like kind of thrown back, because I'm like, on a weekly basis, maybe to my friends, I'll be careful and I'll say, oh man, I spoke bad about someone. Oh, I did this about someone. But then therapy is like, this is the wrong thing that's happening. So how do you like balance that from an Islamic point of view? Do you have the understanding of that?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely concepts in Islam which we know are true, right?
Yes.
For example, like other misconceptions as well that are often there, like, people talk about mental health challenges as ayn, or black magic, or, there's a jinn issue. And we know from Islam that ayn is true.
Yes.
We know jinns are real.
And black magic is real.
Black magic is real. And there are actual people who go through those challenges as well.
Yes.
But oftentimes we find that people just blame mental health challenges on those concepts to just avoid actually doing the work. And so oftentimes we find it's really not those issues. It's actually just mental health challenges that people are not ready to face yet. And so from an Islamic point of view, like we have in the Quran, like we have many ayahs that talk about emotions, and the verily in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find ease. So there's emotions acknowledged, there's remedies as well given to us, and then from the Sunnah as well, we have so many areas where the Prophet himself had the year of sorrow, right? So we saw him weeping as well when his son was passing away. Like there's so many areas where we saw his emotions come about, and he gave us du'as as well that we could use. So in Islam, we have so many remedies and interventions for our mental health challenges as well. Those are very helpful and applicable as well here. So that's where I think the Muslim therapist is able to really bring those together in their practice. So Islam has those remedies, and I think it's very helpful to use those. But also when it comes to like actual more clinical disorders, or like more deeper mental health challenges that we might have, it definitely helps having a mental health professional as well kind of integrate their clinical experience and expertise to bring those two together to help you.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just curious from like the perspective of like, just because therapy can be like talking about other people and other things. Is there like, this is just something that I'm currently thinking about so much. Is there like an allowance, or is this something maybe if you are not sure if it's like, it's okay, we can like think about it, but is it considered backbiting then? That's what I was thinking about recently.
That is a good question.
I know.
My instinct is it's not.
Yeah.
Because now you're not doing it to kind of like just the other person, let's say, necessarily. You're trying to get help for yourself,
exactly,
and you're doing it for like professional reason here to get actually to the next stage and get beyond it,
and growth, and
growth,
actually
exactly.
improve.
But this is a scholarly question. I'll put that caveat there. I'm not a scholar.
No problem. No problem.
But one, I think, important thing as well to recognize is that, especially when it comes to gossip and things, that's one of the concerns about people reaching out for care is that, okay, my story will now be community gossip. Like everyone will know about what's happening in my household, like what I'm going through, and things like that. One of the key things to remember is like therapy is very confidential. The therapist actually is bound by ethics, that the code that they follow, that the regulation that is kind of like regulating them as a profession, bounds them for that privacy.
Yes.
So when you go to a therapist, it's a very private, it's very secure, and the therapist actually is bound by their actual code to protect that. And there's actually like it's actually very hard for even others in the community to get access to that. It usually requires a written consent from the client, especially in our case, for example, when someone needs access, even when it comes to, let's say, a parent of a client who is not a minor, like we would actually get the written consent of the person and then only release their file to someone else or share something. So therapy is very confidential. And I think that's something just for people to know, that it's safe when you go to a therapist, that your issue won't be public gossip.
Exactly. And I think that's just reminding me, like when we're even thinking about the Prophet ﷺ, that people came to him for advice as well. And there was that concept of getting advice from, and it's different scenarios and situations. So there's nothing wrong with that. I think just as like when you're building that relationship and you're like, oh man, I feel like I'm talking about this a lot, and this is now something that I need to think about. But yeah, I think it's just a part of therapy that is, there's backbiting with intent, with bad intention, where it's like, I want to shame this person, or I want to make spread, as you said, it's like that gossip. But then there's the confidentiality and the closeness of, well, this is advice to grow.
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's cool. Something in my head, I was like, I'm just going to say it. This
Go
is
for it. Good question so far. I'm loving the discussion so far.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really good, like to just have a good understanding of what the accessibility issues are, because alhamdulillah, then we can see that there's so many resources out there now for people. I know something that like people may go through is that unsupportiveness of family, friends, or like their spouse of even seeking therapy. How would you say like someone manages that?
It's a very good question. So it comes up all the time.
Especially
I think the culture shift as well that's happening with generation to generation. I think overall we find like a lot of the youth actually is leading a lot of the conversations. They're much more open to seeking care. And what I find generally, so I'll kind of like rephrase the question in one way, which is like, how do we actually get them from that stage to actually helping them get the care as well? Like, how do we encourage our loved one to seek the care that they might be wanting? And so generally speaking, what we say is like, really try to acknowledge and kind of validate their emotions that they might be going through, and especially acknowledge their concerns and fears around therapy, because it's a valid fear for them at that point, right? But beyond that, really like talking to them about the benefits of therapy, how it can help them in their overall well-being and their spiritual well-being, how it can improve their relationships, and especially also the cost of inaction. Like sometimes that's also like a helpful reminder for people, like this could maybe save our marriage. This could maybe help us get better grades, right? Not doing this might actually result in X, Y, Z. That actually helps put that contrast for people, okay, really understanding what is the benefit of actually getting that care and seeking that care. The other reason that prevents people from getting to that stage is the misconceptions. Like some of these we discussed today, a lot of times those misconceptions hold people back from actually reaching out and getting that care. So dispelling those, addressing those misconceptions helps in that as well. The other piece is around actually showcasing the alignment with Islam, of how Islam actually encourages us to seek that care, right?
Exactly.
For every illness, there's a cure and treatment. This is like us reaching out and getting that, right? So showcasing that how Islam actually encourages us to seek help and get that care. And then at the end of the day, it's their decision. So we talk about how, like, a lot of times when we see clients being forced to get therapy, it usually ends up being very ineffective because they're forced to it. So what we recommend is, really give them all the information, give them all the facts. But at the end of the day, they leave it for them to make an educated, informed decision based on their own beliefs and values.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's still possible that at the end of this, they might not be ready for it, right? Maybe provide them alternative resources. So for example, like if they're not ready for one-on-one therapy, maybe provide more community-based solutions, like support groups or attending a lecture at the masjid in a different topic that they're interested in mental health. That might open up them a bit more, and when they're ready, they feel comfortable, then they can actually take that decision to reach out and actually seek that care themselves.
Yeah, that's very well said. I really appreciate how you use the word cost of inaction. That's like now stuck in my head. I will definitely be like, oh, the cost of inaction. Because I've never thought about it like that. To really encourage someone to do something is actually, hey, well, if this doesn't happen, this could ruin our marriage. This could make us not get good grades. This could be the reason that our family breaks apart. Like, it's things that could actually happen, which you can see like 10 steps ahead that's where it's leading to. So that's what acting will do. That's really good.
100%.
Yeah. It's actually a really cool concept. I was thinking when you said that there's like a cure for every illness, that I think one of the ways to think about mental health is that in this day and age, like, the way that we struggle is very different now. And that's why things are shifting for us to have the resources. Because before we could say, like, for example, for Hajj, like before Hajj was, and alhamdulillah, the days are coming up, it used to be, the struggle used to be a physical struggle and a financial struggle. People would pack up their things, they'd go, and they wouldn't know that, okay, I'm going to be gone for months now. The travel would be long. But now, from what I personally experienced this too, that Hajj is a very, like, it's a very spiritually and like mentally, it's like the patience that you need to have for the waiting period of, am I going or not? Is this going to work out or not? And just all of that. When I was thinking about that recently, I thought, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed that physical struggle for us in many ways, but then the mental issues that we go through are still problems. Shifted, it's still like something you have to be patient with. It's still something that makes you cry the same way that physical hardship and financial hardships made other people cry. So I think in that very similar way, that's what, if we can just, if everyone can look at mental health like that, that's what it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen your struggles in a different way now, and that this can be a struggle, and now we can seek the resources the same way the physical and financial issues, people had used different struggles to overcome that during Hajj, for example. So if we can shift that, then we realize, like, it's something that everyone needs to work together towards.
No, absolutely. And this life is not easy, right? Like, for a lot of people, we have different challenges all the time. And we know from Islam as well, right, that there will be challenges, there will be tests, the believer will be tested. And good glad tidings to the patient.
Exactly.
So our goal is to persevere through the struggles and actually exceed and excel in these struggles, and come out in the positive way and positive action going forward. And even in the way we see from when the Prophet's son was passing away, Ibrahim, he's talking about how, like, he was weeping and, like, he acknowledged his own grief, but he said that the tongue would not say anything that displeases Allah. So also, like, how we acknowledge and validate our emotions, but how we kind of, like, express that going forward and take action from that going forward is important as well.
Exactly. And then even realizing that our prophets, they also went through that. They went through that grief, and it's part of the test. I think getting to that point where it's like, this trauma that I experienced was part of my test. That's like, it takes time, but 100%. When you can understand that it is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using to make you stronger, and using to give you more resources and make you a better person.
And a lot of times, what we find is that when people go through these mental health challenges, they actually get closer to Allah as well, which is a beautiful gift on its own, right, for people. So,
exactly. SubhanAllah. Inshallah, we'll pass it over to Brother Kashif now for questions from the audience and from him.
Jazakallah khair. So before we get there, we have been displaying the contact information. So I think it was www.rucare.com. Is that correct?
That is right.
And so I'll just let you speak a little bit about this here. So the Instagram is ru.app. And then they can also connect through to the website.
Absolutely.
And then maybe while we're on this page, I see the services, maybe just at a high level, like what type of services do you offer? What programs? What could people reach out to you for, inshallah?
From? Absolutely, inshallah. So our goal was to really make it easy to access care. So when you go to ruhcare.com, as you see in the website here, you could access care as an individual, couple, child, or teen. If you scroll down, Brother Kashif, I want to just show you the 3-step process on how they could do so. It's very simple. When you click one of those buttons there, how it works, perfect. It takes you to a matching form. And that matching form is really like 2 minutes form. It takes into account your needs and preferences like we were talking about earlier. It really takes, everything that you're coming in for into account to really personally match you with the right fit therapist. And within 5 minutes there, you will have a free 15-minute introduction call booked with your therapist. And that helps you, like we discussed earlier, to really like share your needs with your therapist, like really learn about their approaches and therapy. And if you feel it's a good fit for you, then you actually start therapy from there on the therapy platform. One of the barriers we didn't actually talk about is financial barriers. So alhamdulillah, with Ruh as well, majority of our clients are insurance based. So they get therapy covered as a benefit. SubhanAllah, we as a Muslim community maximize our dental and vision insurance, but we don't really take advantage of what we have here. So alhamdulillah, a lot of clients are doing that now. They're using their insurance for therapy. And for folks that don't actually have insurance, we have a comprehensive financial assistance program so that no one is left behind, essentially, when they're reaching out for care, alhamdulillah. So yeah, it's a very simple, like 3-step process to accessing care. They can book a call in 5 minutes, get that 15-minute introduction call, and seek therapy from there. And one of the main reasons what I find as well is why therapy is effective is because the therapist is objectively involved. They're not involved in your life story emotionally, right? So they're able to like look at it from an objective point of view and give you that feedback, provide you that second opinion. What we also find is a lot of people come to us just for second opinion, like, the therapist, because they just want that sounding board there, right?
Exactly.
And then on the other end, like, they come to us as well for growth, like you highlighted earlier, right? Like they can grow in their relationships, their self-confidence, their communication, time management. There's so many areas for all of us to grow in. So it's not only for mental health challenges that you come to a therapist. You can seek therapy for many different reasons. And it's not only for mental health illness.
Yeah, exactly.
Jazakallah khair. Yes, that's a very good point, and we make it all the time about the therapy being covered by private insurances. So I encourage everyone to look at that, and because a lot, and during COVID, I found a lot of workplaces have actually upped their coverage for mental health quite significantly. So please look into that. It's better, than Sun Life and Manulife keeping billions of dollars of profit, that money being reinvested back into our community and the people that are trying to help us. It helps enable them to build bigger and better services, inshallah.
And help yourself, subhanAllah, really take advantage of benefit yourself as well with it.
Exactly. What's the harm that could come from it? It could only help you grow and be better, inshallah. So yes, we had a few questions come in during Instagram also. I think we covered a lot of them, but inshallah, I'm just going to ask them again if you just want to sort of summarize, because we reply to the stories with the timestamps.
Got it.
So the first question that sort of came in was, any ways an individual can become an advocate within their own friends and family?
Absolutely. So subhanAllah, there's definitely a ways to become an advocate for your loved one that might be going through mental health challenges. Like we discussed earlier, you really have to come from a supportive and a compassionate perspective, right, to help them. The first step is really like, acknowledging the emotions that they're going through, validating those emotions, and acknowledging their fears and concerns around therapy, talking about the benefits of therapy, what it could mean for them, for their overall spiritual, mental well-being. Then cost of inaction that we talked about as well.
My favorite word now.
The benefits, exactly. Alhamdulillah. The benefits of seeking that care. Then the third piece is like dispelling a lot of the misconceptions and myths, and with actual facts that we could provide them. That is one of the things we didn't talk about was mental health is a Western construct. It's really not. It's actually something that Muslims were at the forefront of long time before the West. Then the other pieces around like actually like talking about the alignment with Islam as well, of how Islam actually encourages us to seek that care, right? And how we're recommended to tie our camel and then have tawakkul on Allah. Therapy is an example of tying that camel. But at the end of the day, the fifth thing would be really just letting them make that informed decision. Our goal is to inform them, give them all the facts, give them the support, but help them come to that informed decision based on their own values and beliefs. Lastly, if they're still not ready, provide them alternative resources and solutions that might be helpful, like community-based resources, support groups, lectures and things like that in the community.
Exactly. Yeah, that's well said.
Jazakallah khair. So, related to that, a live question came in where someone is asking, is there anything people are doing, maybe even not intentionally, that works against people wanting to seek help? For example, their actions discourage people from seeking help. I don't know what exact example they're referring to, but maybe one of the things is like oftentimes you see people struggling and the advice they're getting is just read more Quran, just do more dua. Well, obviously, I'm not neglecting the need for that, but maybe that's not there's more that can be done. So as a community, as individuals, do you see there's things that we might be doing that we might mean well, but they're actually discouraging people from seeking help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there's definitely some aspects that come to mind. So like you said, reading more Quran or dua as a solution to everything that comes about from a mental health perspective. That spiritual bypassing, like we talked about before, like you're really trying to apply a spiritual remedy to might not actually be a spiritual problem. So really not, obviously there's benefit like we discussed in actually having the duas and hadith, because we have duas and hadiths for anxiety, stress, and different things we might be going through, but actually seeking that care when it's actually needed. So not actually bypassing it, but really addressing the psychological needs. The other piece I see as well is sometimes people over exaggerate when it comes to mental health challenges, and they say that they're going through X, Y, and Z, even though they might not be. And that exaggeration sometimes leads to people thinking and undermining people who are actually going through those challenges. And sometimes we joke around like, oh, I'm OCD about this and things like that as well.
Yeah.
When you might not actually be, just more figure of speech. But for people who actually have
Thinking about
OCD or
jokes too.
waswasa, right?
Yeah.
It might undermine them.
Yeah.
So those kind of things I think we do sometimes as a community, which might prevent people or add to that stigma as well.
Exactly. One thing I was thinking about is like, even when you like, for me, I can be that like therapist friend or family member where people come and seek advice. And I was just learning about this, that there's actually this like threshold of how much someone is speaking. And at that point, it can be that they're going into a rant and they're going into like rumination. And at that point, you can actually stop them, where I'm super like, oh, like someone's talking to me about their problems, I gotta listen. But then that can kind of be one of those things where it's like, even for me, I know that, I'm letting this person take in to their rumination and negative thoughts. And it's like, stop here. I actually don't have the tools for that. Maybe you need a therapist for that, which is such a hard thing to say to like a Desi family member or like anyone. It's like, how could you even say that? But that's actually, I think that's one of the ways I need to work on, where it's like, actually, I think I can't help with this,
Right. Yeah, no, actually, that you highlighted a very good point, very important point, because I think you have to be truthful with yourself, right? They are putting their trust in you and opening up to you, knowing that, you might not necessarily be the best fit, but then that's on you to actually say, hey, this is where I can help you with. Obviously, being a supportive family member, friend is super helpful. But there's a line where, now it's getting to like professionals, you need a professional to come in to help. Being upfront with them, like, I know you trust me, and that to honor that trust that we have with each other, I want us, redirect you to a mental professional to actually help you with this, right? So very important point. 100%.
Jazakallah khair. So the next question we had from Instagram was, what role do masjids play in making mental health care accessible, if any? So, we're sitting here in Masjid Darul Iman in Markham, and Jazakallah khair, we're very thankful for them for giving us a platform where we can have these conversations weekly. Brother Mushtaq, who's a regular host, is actually on the board of directors of the masjid, so he would be very interested in this answer also. I'm sure he'll watch later. But what role, if any, from your experience, do you think masjids play in making mental health care accessible, inshallah?
Absolutely. I'm truly grateful for a masjid like this, to really be at the forefront of leading the conversation around mental health. So alhamdulillah, I'm glad that such a thing exists here. I think overall, like as Muslims, like we see masajids are like as our hub for the community, right? Naturally, what happens nowadays is when someone is going through a mental health challenge, like the first person they go to is an imam. Like they just kind of go, hey, I'm going through this issue, can you help me with this? And they're on the forefront, they're the front lines, which makes sense. But the imam is not necessarily a mental health professional. It puts a bit more undue pressure on them to be a professional which they're not trained in. We wouldn't go to a tax professional and ask them to do our surgery, or go to a doctor and ask them to do our taxes, because they're not trained in that profession. But we still go to a spiritual professional and ask them to be a mental health professional for us. So I think that's one aspect where masajids can actually take a more upfront approach, which is like having more mental health professionals integrated into the community. So with Ruh as well now, like we started masjid counseling programs. Like we're partnered with the main mosque in Ottawa, one in Regina, Dar al-Falah Islamic Center, a few more coming up as well, where we're able to kind of help them be an extension of their team, provide counseling services for their masjids, alhamdulillah, as their mental health experts. So integrating mental health professionals that way, so that the masjid actually has mental health services from mental health professionals, takes the burden away from the imam, helps the community as well. So that I think is a more longer term goal. I think that's very possible now. The other piece is a lot of education and awareness, which, mashallah, we're doing this now with the Darul Iman here in Happy Strong Family, but a lot of doing workshops and seminars, because what you find as well in our clients today is like they have like very little knowledge around mental health. especially from an Islamic perspective. And I think masjids can lead that conversation and have that education. And to masjid's credits as well, I think over the last 10 years we have seen that improvement. Like 10 years ago, we didn't have khutbas around mental health. We didn't have as many seminars, webinars, conferences around mental health. Now we do.
Yeah.
I think we're making progress in the right direction.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to do as well there.
Exactly. I really appreciate how you mentioned that the imam can redirect, because we're talking about that redirection, even friends and families. The imam can redirect to others, because I hear this conversation, and I've been part of conversations where I'm like, yeah, imams need to know how to, because they're at the front line. That's why they should know how to deal with people who are bringing their mental health issues. But it's like, at the same time, they have their own niche of, well, they're taking care of the mosque and they're leading the congregation. So for them to be, they can be the advisor, but for actual, like, okay, this is deeper issues that you need to go through to actually be able to redirect. 100%. I think that would be a shift in our community, because right now I do hear more of the other conversation where it's like, well, mom should know, which is, I think that's like, first time I'm hearing a different perspective, and I like this perspective, because then we can give them the resources to give,
because it puts unfair pressure on the imam too, right? There's so many things for the community, and to ask them also to become another mental health professional is just a lot to ask.
That's a really good point of view. Yeah,
Jazakallah khair. I think it was the question on the live stream which we answered well during this discussion was what role, sorry, it was right here. From your experiences offering therapy, counseling for mental health, what role of a masjid imam?
That's so interesting.
So someone had asked that, so I think we've answered that question.
We did.
Now, and I saw on your website it's also /masjid. It's the masjid program you were referring to.
Absolutely.
So is this how, if anyone's listening and they want their masjids to get involved in mental health and offer programs, or if there's anyone from the masjid listening, is this where they can go to learn more information?
That is where they can go. The idea was, like, alhamdulillah, we had the mental health infrastructure in place now, like we talked about earlier, with supervision, having a really strong, robust system for our therapists to be exceptional clinicians. And then we had the liability and the compliance of the platform, the HIPAA compliant platform. So we have all those infrastructure pieces figured out, so that all masjids don't have to recreate the same wheel. The idea is we leverage that resource and really scale that up to help our communities have that support ecosystems built up all across the country, inshallah.
That's awesome.
The long-term vision as well, by the way, is that, subhanAllah, like right now we are working with the masjids to kind of like help fund some of the programs for zakat clients and so on. Actually, the main mosque in Ottawa reached out to us for this, because they were finding that a lot of their zakat clients were coming back again and again. And their goal was to kind of help them get back on their own feet.
Yes.
A lot of times it's mental health challenges that they're going through. So the idea was we would help them. It supports the client long term. It helps them much reduce the pressure on the zakat system. It just helps them becoming like contributing members of the community. So it's a win-win-win for the whole community, essentially there. And the long-term goal is, like, we actually now start applying to grants together with the masjid. So it's tapping into the government funds to help sustain the program. Long-term vision is it's fully from the government, so that our community has that resource fully accessible to them, and not from the community funds, but rather the government funds, inshallah.
Wow, that's so cool. Would you say there were success stories out of the therapy that was given to those who are seeking zakat?
Alhamdulillah, this actually is very recent. Alhamdulillah, it's recently launched. So Darul Falah is like the first one which we launched with. If you go to the dficregina.com/counseling, you'll see it's directly, in the masjid's website, but powered by Ruh. And, we start helping their clients there. Ottawa is launching soon. We're doing something in person as well.
Got it. It's like launching. That's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome.
Jazakallah khair. So, we're approaching the top of the hour, inshallah. I'll ask a few questions also from my perspective.
Absolutely.
And then we have some comments and questions maybe if we can get to. So one question, so obviously we're trying to build culturally and faith-based responsive counseling. From your experience, is there any segments that are sort of still we could spend more resources in, maybe particular cultures or male versus females, like before there was a female dominated field, right? Are males catching up? Is there still a need for more males? Or is there certain communities that you're noticing, certain languages that maybe, if there was more therapists, more help available, it would benefit the community?
Absolutely. It's a very good question. So let me think about this a little bit. I think from let's talk about some of the barriers so like we can kind of address some of those things. So I think from a faith-based barrier perspective, alhamdulillah, we're getting there. I think we have a lot of good, strong Muslim therapists now that are providing that care. From a language perspective as well, a lot of languages are covered, so that's pretty good. One, I think thing that came up recently is like there's a lot of Uyghur Muslims that are resettling here in Canada.
Yes.
And they were asking us for someone that speaks either Uyghur or Chinese or Turkish, because some of them actually lived in Turkey and they're coming from there. So there's definitely needs in those language areas specifically. In terms of gender, 100% still definitely a female-dominated field. So we still need more males to kind of enter the field. And I think what we have found as well is like a lot of clients, demographic-wise, are more female. About I would say even 75%. And so I think having more conversations, especially with males around mental health, I think would be a need as well, where they're now like getting opened up to the concept of seeking care, because generally they want to be tough and like, not actually seek care when they actually sometimes need it. And so having those conversations is definitely important on the male side, and having good male therapists as well. It's now males are very limited therapist wise, and having strong male therapists is also even further limited. So the more males enter the field, that will be super beneficial. Then the other piece is accessibility. I think, alhamdulillah, accessibility-wise, we're doing good there. We have virtual accessibility across Canada now. So anyone, anywhere can really access care now. And financial accessibility, alhamdulillah, we have that covered as well with insurance and the financial assistance. So that's good as well. So I think it's really some languages, definitely more males, I would say.
Jazakallah khair. That's a great answer. So yeah, a few comments that were coming in were, great point, Munta. Therapist needs therapists. So that's good. Sorry, I'm just trying to get through some of them. Here we had someone saying, "MashaAllah, great podcast. Alhamdulillah for what you do." Then we have this one here, "Alhamdulillah, great podcast, very important topic, impressive, present of beneficial information, MashaAllah." So another one here was saying, "Great episode. Thank you, Ru, and happy strong family for helping break stigmas. May Allah reward and increase the efforts."
Ameen.
So yes, Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for all the questions and comments. And I don't think we'll be able to make it through all of them, but we have put up the contact information where you can reach out. And alhamdulillah, we're building awareness for mental health, where like you're saying, a lot of work is being done. A lot of work is being done in masjids. On this show, like as Muntaha, it's a very favorite topic of ours, and to build awareness. But one thing I get concerned with is, do you think it's possible to build too much awareness to the point where it could negatively impact things, right? I've seen this with other causes sometimes, and they, the pendulum shifts too much. And for example, like Munta was saying, we start diagnosing people, or or one of the things is there's a lot of people that are fearful of marriage because they're like, oh, there's so many problems, there's so much awareness of so many problems out there that they just don't want to get married anymore. Right. So what's that sort of balance? And do you think we're anywhere near that point, or there's still a lot of work to be done before we even should be considering that we're sort of aware near that point, or maybe there's no such thing. Maybe there's no such thing.
That's a very good question. I'm thinking of so many different areas to answer that. We were gonna say something, I think.
No.
Okay. So I was gonna say, like, I want to introduce a concept before maybe I answer the question. So there's this concept of value-based care, which is very popular in the conventional space. We haven't brought that as much to the Muslim space, so I think it's important to talk about it. The concept really is about how can we improve the value for our clients and patients at the end. You can do that in two different ways. One is you can increase the outcomes, the output of it, or you can decrease the cost of providing that care. So when it comes to increasing the outcomes, it really is measuring outcomes as in the result the client is seeing after they receive the care. So not the number of sessions that they're doing, not how the therapist is following a particular CBT, let's say, framework, but really the outcome of the care that the client is seeing. And then on the bottom side, like the reducing the cost element, how can we reduce the overall cost? So not the cost per session of this therapy session, but really the overall, from now you need a clinical admin person maybe to help there, the technology costs, there's all of the different elements that get into providing that care. Mm-hmm. How do we reduce the overall cost? So the idea is like, how do we really improve our value? We could do that with improving outcomes or reducing costs. So alhamdulillah, with Ruh, like we're able to kind of do that with technology. The reason I bring that up is because it changes the things that we measure as a point of success, right? A lot of times we see masajids, or like in general, actually a lot of mental health organizations as well, use events as a number of success metric, right? we do this many events, and that's what a success means to us. But it's not really that. It's really the benefit, that the outcome of that event, that really is what we should be measuring, right? So when you ask about doing a lot of events or overdoing events, I think if we do overdo events which are not necessarily needed, it can certainly like result into that information overload. But if you're asking the community, seeing what actually are the needs and addressing those needs again and again, like all the different needs that are there that are coming up all the time, then that I think will be very impactful than just having similar events all the time that might be resulting into that information overload. The other thing is, like, I think having more awareness is better than having the lack of awareness. So I don't think there will be an issue necessarily, but I would say really like measuring events based on the need rather than just running the event.
No, Jazakallah khair for that answer. So, Munta, I'll pass it back to you to inshallah wrap up. Before we get there, one more question. I'm sort of switching topics. Obviously, mashallah, we have someone doing great things in the space, an entrepreneur, right? A tech entrepreneur. What advice do you have for sort of the younger generation of entrepreneurs based on your experience? What's something you could tell them?
Alhamdulillah. So one thing I would say is like, entrepreneurship is definitely a journey of ups and downs. There's a lot in there, but it's a lot more fulfilling because you see the impact of your work directly that you can have on your community. You can do so much more through entrepreneurship. If anyone's looking to do something, I think it's really about having a strong intention, finding a good problem to solve, and putting your best to kind of make it a solution, but really falling in love with the problem that you're trying to solve, not the solution. So we started with the mindfulness app. I never imagined that we would be a therapy platform. SubhanAllah. We were trying to solve the problem of having access to Muslim mental health care. And slowly people actually led us to, when we started hearing people like asking about therapists, that we started realizing that's the main need that people are having, and we kind of pivoted there. So I think it's about having a strong intention, what you want to do, and actually working on that, and Allah will open doors, and Allah has opened doors for us, and like from places we never imagined. And so I think there's one important thing to realize as a young entrepreneur is like, you can plant the seed, you can have a strong intention, and you control the process. The destiny is in the hands of Allah at the end. So you do your part, like we talked about tying the camel. You tie a camel, you do your part, and Allah will open doors, inshallah, for you.
Jazakallah khair. That is beautifully said. So, is there one thing, if there's one thing that the audience can take away, what would that be from today's podcast?
It's a good question, subhanAllah. I think there's a lot we discussed today, subhanAllah, very impactful things. But I think if there's one thing I would say, don't be ashamed of reaching out for care. You're definitely not alone. There's a lot of people in the community reaching out for care privately, so you might not see it, but there are a lot of people going through mental health challenges. So you're definitely not alone in your journey. And there's care available for you to help you with your struggles, but also for your growth as well, inshallah. So reach out.
Jazakallah khair. This was such a great conversation, alhamdulillah. I love this topic, as Brother Kashif mentioned, and Jazakallah khair, Brother Kashif, for always leading the conversation and the audience questions in such a beautiful way. Okay, inshallah, we will see everyone next week on our Happy Strong Family podcast. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much.